How to install a selector switch on a Les Paul. Coming up. All right, changing the switch assembly in a Les Paul, or Les Paul Special. Why, you ask? You know, if you've got a Les Paul or a Les Paul Special, odds are if you've got a functioning guitar, you've got a switch. So the truth is, in most instances, you really won't need to change the switch. The switch that comes from Gibson is high quality switch. No need to change it, unless a few circumstances when people want to do this. If you have a Les Paul that has a printed circuit board assembly for the wiring, many people want to remove that and they want to change it to traditional 50s style, just traditional braided construction switch assembly and regular 50s style wiring harness. So we offer a 50s style wiring harness and a switch assembly, and this video is really meant as a supplement to our wiring harness installation video, and we'll put a link to that. But if you have a guitar in which not only do you want to change the wiring harness, but you also want to change the switch assembly because you have a printed circuit board guitar, and when they have the wiring with a printed circuit board, this switch assembly has color-coded wiring, and it's not really easy to adapt that to a vintage style wiring harness. So we do offer the switch assembly for instances where someone has a guitar like that. There's one other possibility in which someone might want to change the switch assembly in their Les Paul. Some older, early 90s, not sure exactly the timeline for this, but some Les Pauls have a metal plate which the pots are attached to. Some of them even have a cover plate or cover can that acts as shielding for the guitar and also grounding. In those instances, we actually recommend people get our long shaft wiring harness if they want to switch it out to 50s wiring. Remove the pot and capacitor portion of their wiring from the plate that came with their guitar, and just simply put our long shaft wiring harness in place. But sometimes people just want it entirely out, and in those instances they may want to change the switch assembly too, because often the wiring for the switch assembly becomes a bit confused because of how everything is wired to the plate in those guitars. So in those cases, someone might want to change the switch assembly too. So we'll show a video, show a few tips and tricks for how to install the switch assembly. And again, this is really a supplement to our wiring harness installation video, and we'll put a link for that. And there's also a kind of a specialty tool for this knurled nut for the switch, and we'll have a link for that as well. So how to install a switch assembly on your Les Paul, coming up. Okay, we have our guitar here. This is a Les Paul Historic R7. I'm going to switch this out to black plastic. Basically, it's a husk right now. So I'm going to switch out the parts, including, I'm going to put in our toggle switch assembly. And let's go over everything that you'll need for this. Needle nose pliers, Phillips screwdriver, alligator clip. This is comes in handy for soldering in the output wire to the output jack. The assembly does come with a Switchcraft output jack, but I'm guessing most people are just going to reuse their output jack. And this is an important tool. This is called an ESP, I wrote it down here, ESP multi-spanner tool. So if you go to Amazon and type in ESP multi-spanner tool, you'll get several people that make a version of this. StuMac has this, Philadelphia Lutherie Tools has it as well. I'm sure probably All Parts does, but Amazon has several that you can select. And this is what you use to tighten tighten and loosen the knurled nut on the selector switch. You can also use it for your bridge posts and for the stop bar screws there. You can use that as a way to kind of adjust the height up and down. So it's got a few uses, but I do recommend getting that. Here, the Cruise Tools socket tool, guitar socket tool. In case you are switching the output jack, you can use that to tighten that nut. And I think that about covers it. We do, again, have a soldering iron here. I highly recommend using 60 watts or better. This is 80 watts, I believe. And we'll want to use the wire layout that came with the switch assembly. And again, this video is just to show the switch assembly being installed. We have another video that is for the wiring harness. So I'll put a link to that in the description. This already has our wiring harness with Lux Repro paper and oil bumblebee capacitors in it. But this video really just concerns itself with the switch assembly and wiring up the output jack. So let's get on with that. All right, so we've got the switch assembly here. First thing we need to do is we need to fish the wire assembly through the routed channel that goes diagonally through the guitar here into the wiring control cavity. First step is to take the knurled nut off. And I'm going to switch the plastic out in this guitar to black plastic. So I'm going to switch this. I have a black plastic poker chip and pick guard, and also I think if I can find one, I'll get a black plastic output jack plate. But I've got to find my poker chip here. Hold on one second. Okay, so that of course needs to line up with the hole there. But before we get to that, we're going to put in the switch and the wiring assembly that goes with it. So that's soldered up to the switch. We have our output jack wire labeled, our neck wire labeled, and our bridge wire labeled. Now each one of these goes to the corresponding neck or bridge volume pots, and this of course goes to the output jack. So before we fish this through, I do recommend get a little bit of tape. We want to keep all these labels on here obviously, because we do not want to get confused about what is what, but put a little tape on there. It'll help in guiding this through the channel. Just I'm going to start here by fishing the wires through that rectangular opening there. Then this will be the same for really any Les Paul guitar. So let's fish these through. You may have to flip it over. They kind of have a tendency to get hung up on the neck pickup. Make sure they make it through the bridge pickup slot there. And for right now, let's just free these up through this slot into the control cavity. Now, this is a little bit of a juggling act, but we're going to get the switch into the hole there for where the toggle actually emerges. Have to bend these wires just a touch to get them in there. All right. Now, for the sake of orienting this properly, you do want this horizontal with or parallel to the neck, so that when you do the toggle switch, it goes up and down the way you would expect, like that. Going to get our poker chip, our knurled nut, support it underneath there with your hand. Get it started by hand with your fingers, and then do the final tightening with your ESP multi-tool. This has two sides, one for clockwise and counterclockwise rotation to loosen and tighten it. So just gonna very carefully let the teeth grab in on that. Doesn't have to be super tight, but you don't want this thing spinning. Let's look in here. That's still oriented correctly. Now our toggle switch will come with this cream tip, but I actually have an amber one that I'm going to put on this guitar, so let's might as well just do that now. Okay. Now let's do the bridge connection and neck connection. Solder those wires to the center lug of the volume pots for both positions. So first we'll carefully take this tape off. Okay, before we go any further, I do notice one little problem here. We want that black plastic sleeve for the jack wire to be in the control cavity, so let's see if we can scoot that down. It's kind of hung up right here, I think. The purpose of this sleeve is to prevent the braided shield on the output jack wire from accidentally grounding out a connection in here on either the capacitor or anything else, one of these lugs that would, ground it out and kill the sound, but really not have anything wrong with the assembly, but you wouldn't be getting any sound. All right, so we have that done. Let's separate our, actually we might as well just do this now. This jack wire goes through the output jack hole there in the body. We have a bridge wire and our neck wire. So let's start with the neck. The way I like to do this, I curve it around a little bit, and we will cut it right. Let me grab my wire cutters. We'll cut it. Give yourself a little bit of excess so it'll kind of support against the outside edge of the route there. Again, this is pushback braided wire, so you have to make sure to push back the shield so that there's no chance of one of these strands from the shield touching the center lug or any of these other lugs on the pot. So to accomplish that, you just scoot it back, and then you now can scoot back the center conductor of the wire. And that center conductor is going to go through the hole that we've left here in the center lug for the pickup, or the, sorry, for the pod assembly. Okay, we're going to solder this, and again, I like to put just something down in case there's some stray solder. Protect the finish of the guitar. Remember, always tin the tip. Okay, that moved just a tad when I soldered it, so I'm going to reflow it here just so I can have some pressure on the lug from the wire, so we'll have a mechanical connection. Just hold it while it cools. Now all we have to do is solder the braid to the back of the pot. For that, I'll start by just putting a little bit of solder on the braid here. Just tin that, just so we got a little bit of a head start. And we put solder spots on the back of the pot as a starter for getting this done. It makes it a little easier to already have the pot have a bit of solder on it. I'm just using the wooden stick here to put some pressure on it, and that looks good. So we're set for the neck, pickup, pot, volume pot for the switch. Again, these switch wires go into the center lug. Now let's just do the same for the bridge pickup. And again, give yourself a little excess. Go around the edge of the control cavity route there, and then trim the wire. Make sure to push back the braid so it's clear of the center conductor. So when you do this, also remember we're leaving some space here for the pickup wire that's going to come in, and it's going to go to this outer lug for both volume pots. So the switch selector wire needs to be in the center of the pot. Put a little bend on the end of the wire there so that when I reflow this, we can scoot the wire and have a mechanical contact with the lug. We're not going to be switching the switch out like maybe you would with pickup, so a little bit more of a mechanical connection with that is a good idea. You don't need to worry so much about the possibility of making it harder to swap out like you would with a pickup. So now we're going to go on to the jack wire here. Now, before we do that, let's just make sure we don't have any connections touching each other. All of these are insulated, but don't want to have a stray wire. And you know, I didn't mention this, but generally I do recommend doing this with the pickups out of the guitar. It gets a bit bound up working these wires through the channel when you also have the pickup wires in there. So I do recommend taking the pickups out. I assume if you're doing this, you're also going to be replacing the wiring harness. So you might as well just take the pickups out just so you have a clear path to get the selector switch in without having to run into those pickup wires. Okay, for this jack, I'm just going to reuse this jack that came with this guitar. But basically what we've got here is we've got a mono jack, Switchcraft jack, and it has a lug here that is for the outer sleeve of the 1/4 inch jack, which is the ground, and we have a lug for the tip, hot part of the jack, which is here. And so for the wire here, we're going to solder the braid, which is the ground, to the ground lug of the jack, and we're going to braid the center conductor wire, or sorry, solder the center conductor wire to the center conductor lug here. We're going to need to trim this wire to allow us a little bit of slack. This connection has to be made outside of the guitar. We can't obviously put it in here very easily and fish it through. The hole here probably is large enough to do that, but generally what you want to do is have this jack already assembled on the mounting plate, and then give yourself a little bit of excess wire that'll allow it to just clear the body of the guitar. And then once everything's soldered back in, we will scoot this in, and that excess wire will just be in the control cavity. But you don't want too much, otherwise you're just going to have a big mess of wire in there. So maybe I'll move the camera around here just a little bit so we can see what I'm up to better. All right, so here's a jack wire. Now, again, I'm reusing this, although our assembly does come with a Switchcraft jack in case you need to have that. It comes along with the switch assembly, but this one's fine, although I'll probably switch this again to a black plastic one if I can find a 3-ply switch or jack cover plate. But anyway, so what we're going to do here, this is where we're going to use our alligator clip. I'm going to take our alligator clip, clip it here so we can kind of establish how much wire we're going to have emerge from the body of the guitar. Don't want too much. Don't want too little. And we're going to put this over here. We'll cut the wire there. And now we're going to push back the wire here, the braid, for the ground. May do a little trimming too, but we're going to push this back to expose the center conductor, and we'll solder the center conductor here, get our alligator clip, solder it there, and then we'll be done. Just going to put use the screwdriver as a little support for the soldering. Also, generally orient it so this center tip tab is down. Just so you get full view of both the hot lug here and the ground lug. Okay. Now it's time to solder the braided shield there to the back, or to that ground lug. You don't actually have to pass the wire through it, through the hole there. We're just going to solder it right to the surface of that lug. So we want to make sure that we don't have any of these braids that might, again, get in the way of the jack. Very often you'll see in this plastic tubing come down and butt right up against there and cover up both connections. Don't always, but let's see if we can do it with this. I'm going to trim this back just a touch. It's where these little tiny wire cutters come in handy. Okay. Tin that lug just a little bit. Okay, so we have our shield soldered to the ground lug. We have our center conductor soldered there to the hot lug, and we'll just scoot this down. Yeah, that's not going to quite go over it. Yeah, maybe it will. Just to kind of anchor the plastic sleeve here, and also gives just a little insulation to the connection. Don't really need it, but you often see it that way from Gibson. Not unusual. So now we will put everything back in. And I'll put the screws in, the jack plate there, and we'll be ready to go. All right, there you have it. How to install the selector switch on a Les Paul guitar. So I did it with this guitar, changed out the plastic, put some test pickups in it. Sounds pretty good. All set up the way it should be. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with it. So, anyway, if you found the video helpful, click like. If you'd like to see more videos like it, click subscribe, click the bell, and you'll get notifications of future videos. And once again, thanks for letting ThroBak be part of your search for great guitar tone.